October 25th, 2002, at 7:03. Roll call.
Mr. Martin?
Here.
Mr. Pasquarello?
Here.
Mr. Marcantonio?
Here.
Mr. DeZio?
Here.
Mr. Marston?
Here.
Item number 3, disclosure of no compensation or pension credits received by the board members. We are a volunteer board. We're appointed by the town council, and we do not get any compensation or pension credits for that. Number 4, disclosure of notice. The zoning board of review members shall disclose any ex parte communications about any contested or material adjudicatory facts or opinions concerning the merits of any application before the zoning board of review. Number 5, everybody has received the minutes from September 27th, so I'm looking for approval for the minutes from September 27th, 2002. If there's any additions or subtractions, please speak now.
I'll make a motion for that.
Okay, Vinnie makes a motion. Do I hear a second?
I have a second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Item number 6, approval of decision of Vincent J. Mesolella Jr. of 0 Mendon Road, ZBR 2204. Again, those were presented to us. If there's any additions or subtractions, please speak now, and I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion made. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Item number 7, continuance, the application of Tech Realty LLC owner applicant to construct a 23,700 square foot commercial building on the property at 0 Central Street, AP1, Lot 461. The property is located in a mixed-use 2 MU2 zoning district. According to section 5.4.10.5 of the ordinance, the proposed light industrial use of the building is allowed by right in the MU2 zoning district. The applicant is seeking a dimensional variance pursuant to section 9.3.1 of the North Smithfield Zoning Ordinance. The applicant is seeking dimensional relief from section 12.11 front, side, and rear setbacks, and section 12.11.14 storage and loading areas. Okay, before we start, we have a couple of pieces of evidence that need to get brought in. The first one being, I think it's going to be P9, Tiffany? There is a letter from Duffy and Sweeney, LTD, from Joel Rocha on September 8th, 2022. It's a favorable opinion of why this should be allowed. It's a 7-page document. That's going to be P9. We also received elevation plans, A1, A2, and A3, also from the same. That's going to be P10. What else we got here? We've also received a letter from one of the abutters, Christian de Renendez, from October 6, 2002. It is a 2-page letter explaining why he believes that they should not be allowed to do what they're trying to do there. Also, so that will be, what do we usually do? What letter do we use for that, Tiffany? P, it's not a P, right? What do we normally do on the public? Yeah, what would be the letter?
Just keep it systematic so that wherever you left off, you have a new index for it and you're able to reference it. Don't worry about the minutia of it. Good question, but don't worry
Still
about it.
hold a P then?
Yeah, P's
Okay.
fine. As long as you can find it and access it and differentiate it from what you have, that's fine.
Okay, that'll be P11. Also in that package was a newspaper article from NRA Now from 2022, 10/5. Metal processing seeking expansion on a wetland lot has history of air pollution violations. It's dated October 5th. It says that it's a 6-page document. For some odd reason, page 5 is not in this that we have. I talked to the building inspector today, and he did not have that page 5 either. So just a note that it's supposed to be a 6-pager, missing page 5, so it's really a 5-pager. And that will be
Exhibits?
They were mailed out, I got it in the mail, I don't know if anybody else got it in the mail, but no one else got them. Anybody else got that?
No.
Vinnie, did you get it? No, I received it. And it came from the North Smithfield Town Hall, so. Do you know if you sent that out, or if someone else sent it out, or?
I believe it was sent only to the chairman.
Okay.
I did not mail it out, but
So, what do we have to do in that case, Mr. Archibald? Do we need to make copies of that, or just pass it around up here? It's from the public.
Just refresh my recollection for a second, because I was typing something, writing something here. You
Yep.
received it from who?
The town. And it was information that was received to the building inspector from an abutter.
And you received it?
That's right.
Yeah, so it's fine. You're publicly disclosing it. That's what you have to do with all conversations that happen. And then, quite frankly, the applicant has to have an opportunity to cross-examine that if they choose to do so. So I'd ask Ms. Roca, do you feel the need to cross-examine that letter or time to address it? If not, it would just be entered into the record as an exhibit.
I haven't seen it.
Why don't we give it to Ms. Roca, let her have an opportunity to look at it while you're still entering everything else in exhibit, and she can make a decision as to whether or not she wants to address it. But I want to commend you on the public disclosure. That's exactly what has to happen, just as a housekeeping point for all of you. Some of you have been down this road before, but for our new member, whenever there's anybody ex parte that gives you information, you have to disclose it at the meeting and give whoever the applicant is an opportunity to look at whatever that information is and time to cross-examine if they need it, including an additional meeting. And the board members who have been here and are aware of it are doing that, and I'm very happy with that. Thank you. But you go ahead, you continue to mark other things, and I believe.
That's all, I think that's all that we have to mark.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Mr. Emright has a.
I received a thumb drive. It was towards the end of last week. Tried to open it yesterday and today. I'm having a problem with the file extensions, but there is some information on here that I can't access, but I think you should still enter it into your record.
Okay, so that would be, what, P12? 13? So P13 will be the jump drive, that came with the same packet?
No, this came in.
Separately?
It was hand-delivered to my office on Thursday or Friday.
I just want to note an objection to the record because I'm not going to know what's on there.
Mhm.
And to the extent that we're done tonight, I don't think that should be in the record.
Yeah, I got, respectfully, that's not an ex parte communication because that document was sent directly to our zoning official, so it should be entered into the record as an exhibit. And then Ms. Roca can have an opportunity to review it, cross-examine it, and an opportunity to do so at another hearing if she chooses to do so. That is different than an ex parte communication to a board member because Mr. Emright is our zoning official. But by all means, you do have the right to cross-examine at a later point, should you choose to do so. But it should be entered into the record as an exhibit.
Where did that go? Didn't take that. It's in front of me somewhere, right? Okay, it's another thing. Okay. All right, so at the last meeting,
Mr. Chairman, before you move on, I think Ms. Roca just needs an opportunity to look at that letter that she
You wanna
just
do it?
received and to make a decision as to whether or not she wants to, is that what you were talking about? I'm sorry, you weren't talking,
no, she's talking about the jump drive.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just wanting to note an objection because no one's seen it, so I
Underst-
have a problem with it being in the record.
Understood. It comes from an abutter, so it's like testimony. It goes into the record. You certainly could have an opportunity later. It's an abutter's opinion. I stand by that. Just enter that in the record, and Ms. Roca would have an opportunity to cross-examine that at a later point in time, should she choose to do so. So if it doesn't open and you can't determine what the contents are, then you can't determine what the contents are. But because Mr. Emright received it, it should be entered. Now, back to the letter that you just received from your ex parte communication, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Roca needs an opportunity to review it and then to determine whether it's fine or whether she needs to cross-examine whoever wrote it at a later
Yeah,
point in time.
I don't think it's relevant, so I can address that when I speak.
Okay.
And you had the other document that was with that too, or not? So that was a two-page document, and then there was an article.
I have the article.
You have the article?
Yep.
Okay. So basically, at the last meeting, which I believe was August 27th, we asked for two things from you guys. One was the screening plan, and one was a written letter recommendation from the town planner discussing building use. Did you get either? We have not received that. Did you send that to the,
You've received the screening plan,
is that the three-page building one?
and I'm gonna get to a point on that.
Is this the exhibit P10? Is that what you consider the screening plan? This one?
No, we submitted a whole PowerPoint package. All the screening plantings are in there, and there's a landscape plan from Diane Soul.
And you submitted that to the
uh,
Bill inspector?
Right, correct. If not, we certainly will present it tonight and can make that exhibit available. It's already on the town computer.
And I'm gonna get into detail as to why we might not even need to go down that road in
Okay.
a minute, so.
Okay.
As to the planner's letter, we had already corresponded on that. That's with respect to the use, which isn't before you tonight, which I'm gonna talk about in a minute. They were gonna follow up with the planner. I don't know what occurred after that, so.
So I'm not quite sure who actually made that request. Does anybody know who made that request for the discussion, or discussing the building use from the town planner? Was that someone
I
from the
just
board?
remember, because the end of that meeting kind of
Yeah, ended abruptly.
just raising, based on some of the testimony from the public about wanting the opportunity to look at the use issue myself, because it sounded like they had legitimate concerns, but I didn't make any formal request for a letter or anything like that.
Okay, because it was in the minutes, so that's why I was asking. Okay. You can proceed.
Thank you. Joelle Rhodes, attorney for the applicant. We're here, as the chair noted, on a continuation of the August hearing where we heard from our project engineer and the applicant in detail. As this board knows, this project has master plan approval, and we are here for some dimensional variances, and then we will go back and, before the planning board and get preliminary plan approval, state approvals, so on and so forth. It's been a while, and there have been some changes as well as some misinformation flying around. So I want to take the time to clarify what's actually before this board tonight and what we are seeking in order to streamline things. As I stated before and just now, the use proposed at this site is permitted by right. It's a light industrial use. We're not seeking any relief on the use. We're not here for a special use permit. We're not here for a use variance, and we're also not here for the property north of this site. The only property before you is the vacant lot. It's not the heavy industrial use that's undertaken at the property to the north. We had testimony to that effect. This facility is simple processing and sorting of the materials that arrive. Any further processing, as my client testified, will still be done at the building to the north. This facility does not have the type of equipment that the facility at the other property has. So a lot of this whole letter and this article before you really relates to that northern property, and it's not before you, and I'm not here to speak on that. Abutters seem to be raising an issue and in the press regarding the other facility, and all I will say is that facility is a DEM regulated facility. It's in full compliance. There have been past issues related to testing due to a mishandling by a third party, which is in litigation, and additional controls have been put into that facility, and they have all the mandated pollution controls at the facility. It's irrelevant for what's before you tonight, and in the course of dimensional variance review, I'm not gonna engage in a selective recitation of what happened before DEM. I've been in some of my own tussles, not for this client with DEM, and they're fully capable of enforcing their regulations. So I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole of that facility. pollution permit for that facility is not, is related to the equipment at that facility, which will not be at this facility. So what are we here for tonight? Our advertised we're advertised for 3 dimensional variances. There are 2 dimensional variances under section 12.11 for the front yard variant, front setback and rear yard setback. We talked about these at length, and we're gonna kind of go through quickly tonight. We talked about the quirky nature of the zoning ordinance and the strip of land that the minimum and maximum setbacks that are required at this site. And we also talked about the significant wetlands, which prevent this building from being set at that maximum and minimum rear setback. So we did go through that. We'll brush up and we'll go through that again. The 3rd dimensional variance we had applied for out of abundance of caution was under 12.11, section 14C for the loading dock. We have confirmed, and Mr. Casale's here, our registered professional engineer, expert, that our loading dock is actually at 82 feet. So we don't need that relief. We're gonna withdraw that relief tonight. But we'll go, just because it came up, we're gonna go through that. Mr. Casale is gonna show you, it's about 82.1, and he'll show that in his PowerPoint presentation. With that issue came with some screening. We're gonna have to show that at the planning board. I don't have a problem showing you because it did come up and you requested it, so out of courtesy, we're gonna show you. That's a requirement of the zoning ordinance. We're gonna have to show the planning board, and we're gonna be on the hook for enforcement if we don't comply with. But again, that 3rd variance, we're withdrawing at this time. There was a lot of discussion at the last meeting. Like I said, I'll turn it over to Joe unless you have questions for me now. Yes?
I just have one question with regard to the use, and then I'm gonna let it go, because I agree with you procedurally.
Yep.
That this board has no authority to make any type of ruling or have any input on the use. That is specifically in 3 different places in section 12 set forth. That's entirely the purview of the planning board.
Yes. Yeah.
What the actual use is.
Yes, but it's an it's an allowed use. They review at a level of detail more of the mechanics of it.
Yes, I
at
see.
the planning board.
Right. I
But
saw
not like-
12, for example, the planning board must make a site inspection, where when we do a special use permit, we have individually, or a maximum of 2 together, have a right to go on the site, which is totally different.
Yep.
Section 12 has a standard of what constitutes material increase in traffic,
Yep.
which is a standard that we don't have.
Right.
So that is all, the planning board has all done that. What I don't see, and it's a yes or no question, was at the planning board meeting, was there any discussion as to whether or not the existing facility and this proposed facility together constitute a recycling facility? Because
Let me stop you. Let me just stop you. The applicant's before you tonight for relief that's based on a dimensional variance, and I want to keep you focused. Whatever happened at the planning board is on the record and documented, and that's what brought you here tonight. The answer to that question is not relevant to the decision-making that's before you tonight. And I don't want to be hard on you, but you're going to take us off on a tangent into an area we shouldn't go. We shouldn't be discussing that at all. Any abutter can get up and talk about that because they're abutters. But as a zoning board, you need to focus on the 2 aspects now of dimensional relief that the applicant has before you, because I believe, Ms. Roca, you just withdrew your request for relief under the 3rd tenant, which is 12.11 under the MU2 Zone 14C, right? Joel, correct me if I'm mistaken. Is that correct?
So
All right.
Can I just
So-
add, Mr. Archibald?
Yes.
There's actually 4 reliefs. There's the
Yes.
front, the side, and the back, and then the dock,
Yes,
which
but
he's
they're
taking
under the
dock.
2 tenants. The front and side are under the same
Front, side,
tenant.
and rear.
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Yep,
You
so that's
understand,
why you consider it as being 2? The front and rears could get combined? I
you
guess?
could call it 3, but you understand what I'm saying, under your requested relief,
Okay,
right?
so,
Okay.
all right. Thank you.
Turn it over to Bill.
Members of the planning board, Mr. Chairman.
Can you just have your name and,
Of course. First of all, good evening. Just for the record, my name is Joe Casali. I'm a registered professional engineer. Offices at 300 Post Road in Warwick. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, get into the PowerPoint. I know it's been a couple of months since we have seen you, so just quickly get us all acclimated with some of the specific site encumbrances. We do have new renderings for you, as you've asked. And finally, just a recap of the 3 variances. So in terms of this site, as we talked about, the site is encumbered with wetlands. We've had them delineated by Natural Resource Services back in March of 2020. Some of them are large enough to have wetland buffers, including a 50-foot perimeter. Some of them are small enough that they do not require additional relief from DEM. We also have screens in their respective buffers. And then we talked about the ordinance, and one of the oddities, respectfully, that we find is that in this particular zone, you have both a minimum and maximum setback, meaning that the building must fall within that tiny piece. And I hope you'll see, because of the unique characteristics of this subject parcel, specifically the freshwater wetlands, no building that would be built there would be able to achieve that. So in terms of specifically our proposal, this was a 23,700 square foot building. Roughly, it's about, just for argument's sake, 230 feet by 120 feet with a small cutout there for a parking space. That is the proposed 3 loading docks, and there's also a loading ramp for the forklift access. We have proposed a bermed area as the code requires, so that we can screen from the dissimilar residential use across the street. We've also provided landscape buffering to enhance that screening, and I'll exacerbate that in a minute, elaborate on that in a minute through the renderings. And also part of the process and part of the project was not only to bring the water line as a partnership with the town, but we've also agreed that there'll be areas of that sidewalk along Central Street that are gonna be removed and replaced at our expense as part of this project. This has already been previously discussed. We've also, since we've started the process in adhering to the design standards, you can see we've made some modifications to this building. We have put a lot of architectural stone on the front of this building, yet we're actually trying to hide the building from the residents, but in compliance with code and ask from the town, that is something we have done. And we've also, since we've seen you last, we've lowered the roof line of a portion of the administrative side of this building, just so we can try to give it a little bit more character. So again, the bermed area, the opaque fence and landscape buffer, and all of the street trees. Is there a way to dim the lights so maybe this would be even clearer? That's the existing facility to the north, owned by Material Sampling Technologies. That is a view of the loading area. You can see the screening, the wall, the bermed area. Again, we have, with the technologies, we can scribe in again, we tried to, lower that front roof as best as we could. You can see the extensive landscaping, including the street trees that we're proposing. This meets and certainly exceeds, Mr. Chairman, the, landscape requirements of the town. We feel though that it's necessary. Again, some of the street trees that we're proposing and as much of the existing vegetation as we can lift. And then just one other rendering of again, of the size of this building. Again, the topography slopes towards Central Street, so we'll be able to build, a portion of the rear of the building into the topography to hide it to the maximum extent practicable. And again, views in full bloom of what, what from the roadway shoulder. So in terms of, the landscaping, we have, we do have street trees, shielding the building, but we will have all year type arborvitae trees that will be shielding, the, loading area. And so, again, just in terms of dimensional relief, because I think I was confused last time, this, I hope, will clarify things. So we have this front in, yard setback in the minimum and maximum. So in other words, that building must be within that, that one little strip, which is respectfully an oddity. You can see that a portion of our building is, but there is a portion, because of the freshwater wetlands, that could not be put in that strip. So we're asking for, relief from the 70-foot maximum. We're asking you to allow us to put the building 170 feet from the edge, which requires us to actually come to you and ask because we're exceeding the maximum. And this will repeat itself, the side yard setback, again, having to be 40 feet with a maximum of 70. And as you can see, the furthest point of our building, and again, it's because of the unique characteristics of this parcel, because of the freshwater wetlands, is 281 feet away. So asking relief from the 70, dimensional relief requested of 211 plus feet. And then again, lastly, the rear yard setback, the building cannot be within that strip. It's 530 feet away. We're asking for relief from the 70-foot maximum of 460 feet. We have also went out there and we have measured and we will locate, so code requires that the loading dock be no closer than 75 feet from the front of the roadway. So the closest point of the building that will have a loading dock based on the survey plan will consistently be more than 75 feet, upwards of 82 feet, which is why Attorney Roca withdrew that dimensional variance. Members of the board, Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to answer questions from you.
I have a few questions. What's the current size of the existing building that you guys are in now? Is it bigger than this building or smaller than this building?
It's larger, about 33,000.
So the new building's 33,000 bigger?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think I've testified to this prior, Mr. Chairman. Our initial charge was the applicant wanted 30,000 square feet of program because of the encumbrances. But that's, again, that's just our basis of design.
Now, that current building has a loading dock, I presume?
The existing building does, and the proposed one will as well, yes.
And approximately how far is the existing building off of the street?
It's in relative character. It's probably a few, in terms of, we just drew a north arrow, it is about the same, but in terms of the street, I don't know what that dimension is. I would say roughly maybe a couple hundred feet, maybe 300 feet.
Okay. So obviously, there's gonna be material being moved between these two buildings, correct?
Yes, which is described in, a private driveway, not only that the trucks will be able to do three-point turns, but we will be able to pass and repass, pedestrian and vehicular traffic through them.
So if you get that relief from DEM, you'll be using the transfer of material between the two buildings through that roadway?
Right, but it's not so much the transfer of material. Craig, you want to speak operationally, but how, maybe specifically, how we're going to transfer that material?
I'm just wondering, you know, because you're gonna have two buildings now, right? And so if you don't get approved by DEM for that, those trucks are gonna be going on Central Street, right? So that's gonna increase the traffic on Central Street. So I'm just trying to get an idea of, you know, how you're moving it, you know, are you moving it from the new building to the old building, or from the old building to the new building? Is it old building, new building, old building, new, like how many times you're gonna move it between the buildings? So, you know, just let me finish my thought here. Is one building gonna be part of the process? Yep. Jeff, you wanna swear him in?
Craig Haddad, General Manager, Executive
Vincent.
Chief.
Just suppose he puts his name on the record, that's fine.
Yep.
Now he's already been acknowledged as an expert, that's fine.
I
Yep.
think to answer your question is, the material that would go from this new building to the existing building is a very small portion, because the new building, as we're proposing, is to do the sampling of bulk material there and bring just a small sample back to the other building for further processing.
So,
So in terms of percentage of weight or trips, it's probably 2.5 to 5%. And it would be, if we needed to go on the street, it would be our own box truck. And if that might happen a couple times a week.
so all the material that's coming into your existing building will now go into the new building?
Not all,
Not all of it?
no, a certain stream.
What percentage of the trucks going into your existing building are now gonna go in that new building? Vietnam.
To the new building from the old,
Yep. Like 20% of your trucks?
20% maybe.
And now, once it goes into that building and you just do your sorting and you move it to another building, your old building, it's not coming back to that original building again, right? It's just a one-way?
From that building.
Yep.
It'll be shipped from the new building, the bulk material.
Okay.
So if that connector is not approved, there is no need for an 18-wheeler to pass and repass along the northern portion of Central Street between the existing building and the proposed.
So the point is, you bring an 18-wheeler into that new building, but when you go to transfer that from that new building to the old building, it's not gonna be an 18-wheeler, it's gonna be something smaller, like a box truck, or,
Correct.
right? Okay. And I think, you're on the record, you're saying right now, currently, you get about 4 to 8 trucks a day, or?
It does vary, sometimes none, sometimes 4 to 8. So,
And that's the high end, 4 to 8, or?
yeah, I would say so, that's a busy day.
Okay.
These are delivery trucks like Amazon or UPS, FedEx,
Yeah.
maybe 10.
The parking lot, based upon the roadway, from what I can tell, it seems to be even with the roadway, for the most part, the same elevation?
This parking area?
Yeah,
Yes.
so if you were standing on Central Street at that, you're looking straight, it's pretty flat to it.
Yes, and this was, done to show that if you're standing on Central Street, that's looking through our parking lot into the loading dock. Yes, it's pretty
Yeah.
flat.
And the same thing with the loading dock, is that pretty much at street level?
It is. The change in grade that's gonna, affect things is this slopes, in an easterly direction, and so a portion of this building, will be countersunk into the landscape, rather than raise the entire building.
Yeah, because it goes up on the,
It does, and it
Would that
makes it
be
easier with the loading dock, that this is more of a cut than it will be a fill.
okay. Are you guys, I think that you guys stated that you're not storing any objects outside at all?
That is correct. We do not have any permission, to store any objects outside.
Okay. I'm just trying to go through my notes here, so.
The remaining land, is that all wetlands?
It's all wetlands. That will never be built upon. So when you look at, yeah, being as large of a piece that it is, and all of the jurisdictional buffers, there is no way you will build any inside this. Furthermore, you'll have to be 10 to 15 feet away with your foundation. DM will never even let you put your foundation 10 to 15 feet to the edge, because they know you need to put it in and grade it and get equipment back there, and you need to maintain it. And so when we started laying out this building, the PowerPoint may not show it as accurately as the plans do, but we need to ensure not only that we are inside these lines, we're at least 15 feet inside, because that's just from experience with DMs and asks for.
But the greens, well, that's wetlands as well?
All wet, based on our wetlands biologist, and that will never change in the foreseeable future.
So you're saying that all the corners of your building are 15 feet from that perimeter?
They are 15 feet, yes, from,
So that
in
most
this
southerly-
case, this is the 50-foot perimeter wetland associated with this large swamp.
But you were saying that then you have to be 15 feet off of that
Yeah,
setback, right?
yeah.
So I can see like that corner looks like it is, but that lower one, that top one, looks like it's real close. I mean, the top one may not, but that bottom looks like it's almost touching. That 50 foot.
It may just be the PowerPoint,
Yeah,
the
okay.
plans.
But you got 15 feet all around that.
Yeah, and we will show that specific dimension on the plan. We know from years of experience that we need to get approval from DEM.
And is, like, there's no way of turning this building a little bit, you know, changing the configuration of the building so that you can turn it more and get that loading dock more parallel to Central Street?
Yeah, I mean, so we looked at a variety of options. So based on operational and based on construction costs, you know, having squares of building on the western or northern face is just not anything that would be, you know, operationally what we need. And it's going to be extremely uncost effective to do that. We have looked at a variety of options, and that's why I hope you will appreciate that these are not just boxes, programmatic floor plans that were thrown on the plans. We have consulted with Dan Peloquin, whom I believe you all know. He's a local architect, so that we could come before this board with real relief in terms of what do we really want to build, what is it that's going to work for us operationally, so that when we ask this board, we ask them one time for the maximum relief.
In respect to the trucks, when they're parked, is the plan to have them idling or to be shut off?
I think that would be, we all would like to see them shut off. It's something, I can only give you word salad and say that we're going to, we can put it in a, ultimately a directive, but it'll be an enforcement action on our end.
So would you be against us putting that in a motion?
We would
Yeah.
not.
Okay,
We would not. We would stipulate to that, Mr. Chairman.
okay. Are you familiar with 12.11.14, storage and loading areas?
Yes.
So, under that ordinance, storage and loading areas, the location of any outside storage, maintenance, or loading areas, and I'll refer to loading areas because you're not doing anything outside with storage or maintenance, must be constructed, maintained, and used in accordance with the following conditions. A, outside storage of materials, supplies, or equipment, including trucks or other motor vehicles, shall be permitted only if, I can go through all four or just the one that actually matters. So, number 4, the area is located upon the rear portion of the lot. So, you know, you can withdraw that you're 75 feet off of the road, but the problem is that you're not at the back of the building.
We don't have outside storage of any of those things.
It's for the loading part of it, loading area. So it's for storage and loading areas.
So Scott, just so I'm clear, what you're saying is that if there's a truck parked there, it has to be in the back of the building?
The loading dock has to be in the back of the
No,
building.
so
That's the way I read the ordinance.
A is, so the 14, the section relates to outside storage, maintenance, and loading areas. Section A relates to outside storage. Section C relates to loading docks.
Outside storage of material, supplies, equipment, including trucks or
Right,
other
but
motor
outside-
vehicles.
Outside storage of trucks.
So not the actual loading dock of trucks, such type stuff? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you have outside storage, they can only be loaded and unloaded from the rear of the building.
Okay.
So what you're saying is your interpretation of the ordinance is that storage is not the truck being parked there overnight? There
That's
would be-
not outdoor storage. That would be another special use that we would specifically need to ask you for. For instance, if we were Ace Hardware, would we have to ask you to leave our salt stored outside? And if we did, we would need to load and unload it from the rear of the building. This case, this is a loading dock. Everything will be enclosed from the trucks inside. In essence, it'll mimic what exists today, our buildings, the existing facility, the loading docks are visible. Which is respectfully why I believe they go into the screening, because if it is visible, you need to screen it, especially for medicinal use.
Which is why, I kind of wanted the building to turn a little bit more parallel to Central so you could really screen it, because you may see those trucks, from the street.
And the other difficulty is the truck turning movements.
Yeah.
And so because we don't have the depth, an 18-wheeler, and we've modeled this, moving northbound, would need to make certain movements, to come in and out, especially if there are 3 of them in there. So part of the orientation of the building is not only because of the encumbrances of the wetlands, but it's also because the operational use of the size of the trucks that will be using that loading facility.
Gotcha. All right, anybody else have any questions from the board? Everybody else set?
Thank you.
All right, so we still have the public comment section still open. So anybody from the public that wants to speak, please step to the podium, state your name, and be sworn in, and speak for or against the project.
Do we have to make a motion to reopen, actually?
I don't think we closed it. Tiffany, did we close the public comment last meeting on the 27th, or did
Yeah,
we
we
leave it
were
open?
about to deliver.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to open up the public comment again.
I'll make the motion.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. Good evening.
Hey, my name's John Biragad, 18 Edward Avenue.
Just swear in from Tiffany, please.
Yep, just raise your hand and name and address, please.
John Biragad, 18 Edward Avenue.
Thank you.
So I was asked to, this was brought to my attention by the residents on Central Street. They asked me to come talk to them. I spoke to them, and they have some pretty legitimate concerns about this building and the expansion of the building. One thing that, as we were watching this though, I just have a couple of points. That is, if a truck comes in from this way, how is it gonna, it's gonna have to turn wide in order to make it, if you come in this way, fine, you can go on here and back up here, but if you come in this way, it's gonna have to make a wide turn right over here to make that turn to go in to back up. Okay, and also, the point that you made, sir, is on 1211, design standards for MU2. The way I read it the same way you did. I'm not the expert here. I defer to you guys. I'm not, you guys know, I know nothing compared to what you guys do. We just appoint smarter people than us.
I don't know about that.
So it does say the storage and loading areas, and you did point out, sir, that the area is located upon the rear of the portion of the lot. It says, it's pretty clear to me, it says storage and loading areas. And that storage and loading area is definitely not in the rear of the lot. Now, my concern too is, that was brought up, with these houses over here. And when these trucks come in, oh, I just did that. So when these trucks come in and they turn in, they're gonna have their lights on. And the lights are gonna shine right in the, into the neighbors' houses and stuff. So, so I just made a couple of points and, that I noted, if you don't mind me bringing up.
Sure.
I think they're asking for unusual relief here because the environmental difficulty with the land, there's significant wetland restrictions here. So while acknowledging that they may possibly construct a building here, he should not be able to build it on one this large and this close to the front of the main roads, especially since the proposed loading dock will now be facing his neighbors across the street. These trucks will have to be backed in daily. It will be a loading dock activity every day, and it could be, and in the winter, it could be after 4 o'clock, could be after dark, and the lights and everything will shine into the, it shouldn't interfere with the quality of life of the surrounding neighborhood. I think that's the real issue here. It's just gonna interfere with the quality of life. Lots of times we have people complaining about a business that's next to their house, even though they moved in after the business was already there. So I'll just use an example of an airport because I don't want to get specific of anything going on in town, but suppose somebody moves in next to an airport and they start complaining about the planes flying over. This is not the case here. These people moved in here and now the building is coming in after them, and it's going to have a detriment on the quality of life in that neighborhood and for not just the neighborhood, but everybody. That street is used heavily, a lot of traffic by bicycles. I know this is for planning more so than zoning, but there's bicycles and pedestrian traffic to access the bike path, which is right down the street. So I just want to make it clear that I'm pro-business. We need business in town. Businesses serve a very important function in town. They contribute to our tax base. They provide employment to the region. They keep money circulating in the economy. They create jobs. Business is important, but more important than businesses is residentials that we have to consider. And what does every homeowner want? We want to be able to take care of our houses and want to be left alone. We want a good quality of life where we can raise our children and take care of our families. And we want to know, more than anything, that we're safe when we're in our homes and our families are safe. No more does this building belong in this neighborhood than does a raised ranch belong on Industrial Drive. Allowing this business to make the expansion that they are asking for will change the character of the whole neighborhood forever. It'll increase traffic, which it already gets a lot of traffic. The quality of life issue is this is a quality of life issue as much as a zoning issue. If it wasn't a quality of life, if it was just zoning, I would not interfere with you guys, but this is a quality of life issue, which is why the residents asked me to get involved. You have 3 loading docks in the front of the building, practically on the street. Imagine how 18-wheelers coming and going in the morning and throughout the day, and possibly the night, with their reverse signals beeping, will affect the quality of life in the area for the residents, especially the residents directly across the street. The lights from the building and the parking lot shining in the windows at night. When it's dark out, it doesn't take a very high voltage light to cast light across the street. Now, has there been any alternative plan other than this one presented, or is this the one that they're set on? Is this,
Wouldn't know,
this is it?
wouldn't know. This is what's before the board this evening, Mr. Beard.
Okay. It seems like they went all in on this. An alternative plan might have been a better way to go. It seems like they went all in, and I think they're asking for too much. I'm not gonna get into the wetland issues. There are people here that are coming after me that I know that are gonna discuss that. The applicant is asking for a significant amount of variance relief here. 99 feet for a front yard, 211 feet for a side yard, 460 feet relief in the rear, and 41 feet of relief for the loading dock. The applicant is creating a new building on the main road, and people will see the trucks loading and unloading throughout the day. Again, the relief the applicant is asking for is significant. Think about the normal setbacks for this area. They're trying to make larger project fit an unusable land envelope that's too small. It doesn't fit into the construction of the site. I can't stress enough, the reason I'm here is the quality of life for the residents. They're very concerned, they're very nervous about everything, and honestly, I don't blame them, and that's why I got involved. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Burgos.
Could I ask you
You
a
can ask me whatever you
question?
want.
What would you say to the thought that, with regard to the neighbors, and I'm not trying to be insensitive to them, extremely sensitive to them, but the fact of the matter is that triangle has been marked for some type of commercial development
It has.
pretty much for as long as I can remember. Like, granted, I did not live in North Smithfield for 40 years, but I grew up here, I graduated from here, and I've been back for 6 years. When I was in high school, the beginning of that parcel, I believe, was Gallant Supermarket and Gallant Liquors.
Right.
That entire area has always been earmarked for development.
It's a good point, and I can address that. This project doesn't fit the definition of MU2. It's not consistent with the campus-style cluster development that's in the MU2 definition. Our ordinance says that this district is intended to be provided for a compact planned village type of businesses, not something as large as this that will affect the quality of life, and it will affect the whole neighborhood. It's more for, you're right, it is for business, no question.
Right.
And I support that. I support businesses. Business has to be in the right place. This business, what you're saying is true, but it's not, the MU2 is not for this size business.
However, the last paragraph in the definition of MU2 specifically states that it is also available for contiguous land that is industrial to undeveloped forested areas. And that's exactly what we have here, isn't it?
Yes, no, they're really trying to fit a square peg into a round hole on this one.
I said that at the last meeting.
Right.
What's your definition of an MU? What do you feel would be a suitable business?
Maybe the one that's there, actually, or a more of a shop type of stuff. When he showed one of the pictures that was up there, the whole, I don't know if I can get it back. CJ, can you get that back? I don't know. One of the pictures that showed the actual finished product in the neighborhood, and you could see that business, it's just too big, it just doesn't belong there.
Well, would it be like, I just am trying to get inside your head.
Well, if you go down the street a little bit, you have the
Like
TV.
a shopping mall, like a shopping plaza, you think would be acceptable use?
I don't think, more like a smaller type of situation. I wouldn't say a shopping plaza, but maybe a small strip with some stores in it is what, yeah.
So that, like, those stores could possibly want to be open until midnight?
That's not, we don't allow, there's no stores that are open till midnight. I mean, we can play what ifs.
Like, would it, like Riggio's Plaza, is that what you're thinking?
No, not something that size there.
Not something that size?
No. Anything else?
No.
Yes, sir.
Were you on the council when they made that an MU district?
No, that's been an MU district, I think, for a while, I believe. No. No. Anything else? Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
My name
Please.
is Hudson Pereira.
And your address.
400 Central Street.
Thank you.
So, thank you for the opportunity, board, gentlemen, ladies, everybody here, which is representing our neighbor. I live in this home for, I apologize. Yeah, you're good. I live at this home for a year now. And unfortunately, I couldn't come in the last meeting due to personal situation and sickness, I would say. And I I just want to express a little bit, again, humbly and, you know, as a father of 2 kids and husband, and even a little bit about what everybody here feels. And I don't believe that this is the right step for our neighbor. First, in order to a company operate, you know, you need capacity, you need all the needs to make that happen. And we're talking about a half-acre warehouse. So basically, I understand that the gentleman mentioned the 48 trucks. It might not be the 18-wheelers, but I have experienced in my professional life, again, I'm an engineer and responsible for operations at my company as well. And I've seen such growth, and again, like in the same building, I imagine with a second building of half-acre to keep up with the operations. The goal of the business is to, you know, get money. So it's not to, I would say, keep up with the good old times. Definitely the 48 will not be true. We're talking about more 18-wheelers on that street, more weight on that wetlands. I was even trying to understand about the wetlands association with, you know, like weight or even the salt put in. Again, I will not get into it. I'm just an ignorant person right now. But I just want to stress 2 main things, 3 maybe. Like that company just integrated, was it bought by a different company or it integrated with a different company? Because
Excuse me, sir?
MST
Excuse me, sir, direct the questions to us.
I'm
to
sorry,
the-
yeah.
okay.
MST is not the main company. It seems that they were acquired recently. And even the website have changed, which it stated in the website that they process the material in that facility. And I had a different understanding when the people who are requesting mentioned that they do just sampling. But anyway, just the traffic will be greater, something that we have never imagined or we have never seen before. Other thing is just the secure of our neighbor. I see my house an entrance for somebody who wants to, you know, invade that facility or want to take advantage. Every single one's house is definitely an entrance. I have 2 kids in my home, so I just want to, you know, take care of them, and it's something that really concerns me about, you know, all these things. And one thing that I hear while the attorney was speaking about it, and concerned me, because I have read the article that was published, and with all the violations about the Rhode Island environmental control. And she clearly mentioned that it was a third-party error. One thing I learned working for companies is like, it's your responsibility. So definitely I didn't see much good history of, you know, following the laws, following what is right. And basically, if we give this first step, we will just open for more and more things that they will bring to this, you know, in front of your, the board to, you know, open up some more doors. And basically, like, let's stop here. Like, let's not open this, this door. Let's, you know, keep a good business on our neighbor. And going back to Mr. Dizelle, I apologize, I need to go back to that statement, but I see it as a recycle facility. So it concerns me a lot, okay? Any questions that you might have to me?
Just so you know, it's outside our purview to look at what happened at their other facility, you know, so as zoning, we're here for a variance, that's all.
Okay,
So,
okay,
you
yeah.
know, you can state that, you know,
Yep.
it's your
Yeah,
prerogative to do that, but
Yep.
it doesn't have any weight on what's presented in front of us, so.
Okay, no, thank you very much. I apologize. Just to bring my concerns.
And it's not to say that it doesn't have weight somewhere else, it just doesn't have weight here.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I appreciate. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, thank you. Anyone else?
Please
Dale
raise your,
Burlinghoff, 21 Bruce Drive.
thank you.
Good evening. I received a letter from the Ethics Commission saying that I can speak on behalf of what I believe is a monstrosity that's going to happen on Central Pike. First of all, there were some things that happened within the last few years that changed the zoning map, actually the aquifer map. And a lot of people say, oh, yeah, you know, don't even mention the aquifer. It's like, oh, yes, I have to mention the aquifer because whether or not the planning board put a little side over and says, you know what, we can have manufacturing on this place. The aquifer is still there. It's not going to go anywhere. So I know with this, we're going on a technicality. You're not going to be talking about the aquifer, but yet the zoning board can add to their decision every single zoning ordinance under the 6.19 plan, just to be on the safe side. We can't do anything right now. They can do a lot during planning, but right now the zoning board can protect, number one, our aquifer, which is water. I'm not paying for Woonsocket water, I'm sorry. And I'm not that far from here. So I would like you to add to your decision that if they get by on this technicality, that you add the 6.19 ruling. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Burlinghoff, can I ask you a question? Just one question.
Sure.
Why do you not feel comfortable enough with having the DEM supervising the aquifer itself?
Seriously? I've been to the DEM headquarters. I've talked to several of the people there about our aquifer. They do not have enough people to come out on the property unless someone actually says, hey, listen, there is an aquifer and they're going to be building on this aquifer. But you know what? The town of North Smithfield said, you can build on this, even though there's an aquifer there. That's bull. But now you have a way that you can guide them through the 6.19, and maybe there won't be any human error and any kind of spillage that's going to take care of the wetlands. Oh my God. And then you're going to go down to the aquifer, which is below that. And then in their plans, they already want to take care of Central Street with pipes. At the last meeting, there were rats coming up and down this street. I don't know if I trust anything going up and down that street. But as far as you can only vote on the variance, and I understand that, but you can also add to your decision. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question for you. How many years ago did the town change that aquifer zone into the existing?
The aquifer map started in 2012. The planning board actually was changing the map during the 2018 and 2019. They decided they needed to upgrade the map because they couldn't read it. So this is a fact. During COVID on 8/24/2020, the town planner recommended to our town council that we revise our map to read better. Now, a fact, the town council approved the new and improved map. I think pretty much was shoved down their throat. I saw the meeting on video, and everything is online. Everything I say tonight is online. You can get this. Now, would a special use permit for this area prior to the sudden change during COVID would have been allowed? Maybe, maybe not, but they would have gone through the right steps. They would have gone to you and say, hey, we need a special permit with this MU2. But they're not. They don't even discuss the 6.19. They don't even discuss the aquifer that's underneath it. It's huge. This is one of the biggest aquifers in North Smithfield, in Rhode Island. And I know what I'm talking about. I do a lot of research. This is what I do for my job. So, just wanted to let you know that I heard, I've been up and down Central Street, and I heard the noise coming from the other building. I don't know what they were doing. I didn't want to get on that property, but it was over the decibel level. I always have that on in case we have a turbine, something coming in. But the fact that I was over 500 feet away from the building, and I could still use my decibel meter, and it clicked on 9. It's like, really? And I have it on tape. So do we really want that noise to affect the neighbors? I don't think so. This warehouse is huge. It looks like one of these new Amazon warehouses. It doesn't belong there. A small little strip cafe mall, maybe. That I have a feeling that the foundations are going to sink. So that's what my opinion is. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Please raise your hand, state your name and address.
Leanne Gillette, 49 Orchard Street, North Smithfield, obviously. Trevor Landry, Vice President for Business Development for MST, has the following message on his LinkedIn account. Institute a company culture that prioritizes adherence to safety, quality, and production standards, including a zero-harm corporate philosophy that all employees should return unharmed. That is a very powerful message, but it's very alarming to me. If the Vice President of the Business Development is posting this, then in my opinion, his company most definitely works with some pretty scary materials and or surroundings. So Mr. Landry, I would like to say I speak for most of the people in this room and all who have signed the petition against this approval. We want the same thing for ourselves. We want to be safe. We want quality air, soil, and water. We want to be unharmed as well. Can your company guarantee that you will keep us safe and unharmed? If you cannot guarantee that, then I say to this board, that is the only answer that you need to hear in order to vote no to this zoning request for special variance. I'm hoping that you are not willing to risk our lives being abutters. Please vote no. I'm wholeheartedly against MST being granted dimensional variances to build an additional facility at 0 Central Street for the following reasons. First and foremost, protecting our wetlands and our wells. October 20th of 2022 was Rhode Island Clean Water Act Day. That day highlights the Clean Water Act of 1972. This past October 20th was the 50th year anniversary of the act. This act is aimed at preventing, reducing, and eliminating pollutions in bodies of water across our nation. Clean Water Act Day serves as a reminder to restore and maintain the ocean state's water, protect wildlife, human health, and protect human systems. Allowing MST your approval for a variance to allow them to build yet another additional building. This one is more than 23,000 square feet, plus a dock, and I thought, and I could be wrong, an additional metal holding building. These buildings will house hazardous materials. This proposal clearly puts our wetlands at risk and therefore our wells. There is a natural crown in the ground that runs somewhere between Cider Mill and the historical cemetery that's on Quaker Highway. It continues from Quaker Highway through the MST property and down towards our neighborhood. That crown, for talking purposes, keeps Uxbridge water on their side, North Smithfield's on ours. That's good, and it's also bad. The good is we don't have to worry about another town's water or runoff. The bad is many of the people who are here live downhill from where MST is proposing this building, and we get all of the runoff. My concern is what will that do to our wells? If any contaminants enter the soil and or the wetlands, it will have a negative impact on our health, especially through the possible contamination of our wells. I'm asking, please do not take that risk. Number 2, MST is a precious metal refinery. Some of the materials that they process are circuit boards, connector straps, wire, silver oxide, batteries, and more. MST provides precious metal reclamation and recycling services to a broad range of industries, including dentistry, electronics, photographic, metal, and auto manufacturing, as well as industrial manufacturing, to name just a few. MST does not have a good track record. To name a few, they have had several DEM files and fines due to non-compliance with releasing toxins into the air, and possibly the soil. Those contaminants are all above the allowed limit. Some of those elements found that were above limits: cadmium, lead, mercury, chromium, and zinc, many of which are cancer-causing materials. The DEM, in my opinion, has worked with MST and offered several chances for them to comply with statutes and regulations. Currently, to the best of my knowledge, they are in compliance. However, MST attempts to, and is successful, to turn around, and then they violate again. There have been at least 3 documented fires in the building. Number 3, there is a great deal of technical information regarding both state and federal laws as they pertain to Section 619 that Gail just spoke of. With all due respect to all of you, I commend you for sitting on a board and volunteering, and I appreciate it. I don't know, however, if any of you have any civil engineering practices. If you don't, and this is not meant to be disrespectful, please, I'm not trying to do that. I feel that Section 619 has so many state and federal compliances, I don't know who to go to get the expertise that I feel is needed to make this decision. Number 4, traffic. There is a horrible intersection at the top of Mechanic Street, Central Street, Quaker Highway. If we add more traffic, I can't tell you how many times there are almost accidents from people that are coming from the Bridget O's Plaza towards Central Street, and they blow right through. They put in a new yield sign to try to help. It doesn't help. They just fly right through. Adding more trucks and more traffic there, that's going to be dangerous. It is my understanding that MST will need to tie into the water lines, the closest one being the one that ends on Mechanic Street and Fillion Drive. The last time Mechanic Street was dug up to provide water to the town with the contaminated wells up on Mechanic Street, our neighborhood has had a problem with rats, and we still do. We personally have killed 3, and I'm talking rats, inside our home. You disturb the wetlands, they have no place to go. They're looking for places to go. Now, putting a potential building surrounded by 3 wetlands, I can only imagine what the problem will be from there. Number 5, according to North Smithfield Town records, a building was constructed within 100 feet of a riverbank wetland of an intermittent stream located on the northwest corner of the existing MST building. I would like to know first if the town has been taxing this company based on the existing square footage prior to the addition or including the addition. I ask this because the addition was put on without the permits being pulled. That request was put in as an after-the-fact request. So if it was before, this town is owed an awful lot of money, in my opinion. Additionally, the concrete foundation and the metal building that was added, it was 300 feet by 55 feet added to the existing building. And it was installed by RGN, General Contractor number 35611, without the permits, as I stated. I am concerned, and I feel bad talking without the gentleman here, but RGN is owned by Robert Nigerian, chairperson of this board. I do not know if he was on this board at the time that addition was put on. So I have 2 questions. If he was, it's not even a question, it's a statement. If he was, that's very concerning. If he was not, I'm concerned a little more that a man in his position wouldn't know to have the special permits and ordinances approved that are necessary prior to a building. I would like to know why this board would grant permission to a company who has not followed the rules the first time and has been cited for multiple compliance violations. In closing, this is not a company that should be in a residential area. Cornforth Industrial Park abuts MST's property. This is a business that belongs in an industrial park, not a residential neighborhood. Why does this building have to be on Central Street? Why can't it be in the industrial park? It would still bring in taxes to the town. It could still have many people employed, especially in a time of need that we have in this country. But it would not have an impact on the residents and the houses nearby. It'll plummet the housing evaluations in the area. Lastly, we have a petition that I know we have over 500 signatures on that is against this. I don't know who has that. Somebody here has that. And just keep in mind, or please consider, we are downhill from MST in those wetlands. We get all the runoff in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have questions? Thanks. Anyone else?
My name is Charles Raposa. I live on 399 Central Street. My predecessor brought up a lot of good points, and one of the things she mentioned is at the very top of Central Street, Mechanic Street, and 146A, where it comes together, is already visible signs of trucks going over the island, going across my front lawn because they can't make the turn to go to the existing facility. That's my biggest concern. There is no sidewalk at all in that tight, where it all comes together. There's nowhere to go. Children, families, people walk down to the Blackstone Valley bike path every single day. I see it. They run up on the curb, because there isn't a curb, it's just a grassy area, and they hide from not just trucks, from speeders, from everybody. It is a bad spot. Something is going to happen. Now you're going to throw in more trucks with 3 more loading docks, and only 20% of what they bring to the new facility is going to go over to the other place. I find that very hard to believe. But they're not going to do any metal recycling in the new facility. They're going to do it all in the old. These things all don't line up to me. If they're only going to be 20%, why can't they pick another building in the industrial park? They can just easily put it in the box truck, like they said, and roll it down. This building is too big to fit into a residential area. The street is not properly zoned, built, constructed for any more additional trucks. Already, the trucks that they have, because they're a locked facility, the map's not up there, but they are a locked facility with an 8-foot fence with barbed wire. These trucks cannot pull in if they're not open, so they park right down on Central Street. Right now, they park down the end where there's obviously no housing is right before the bridge. There's a breakdown lane for them to sit. But they still hang out, and people see, eking, trying to get by the trucks that already parked there. Now you're gonna bring another building in, 3 more loading docks on the same street. Now you're gonna move that problem down the street into the residential area? I can't see how in this whole M2, this is not a business. This is an industrial business. This isn't like the AC shop down the other end. It's just not, it doesn't fit into a neighborhood against a residential area. It just doesn't. It belongs in an industrial park. They're doing metal recycling. I don't care how you put it, they're harvesting something from something to get the precious metals out of it. And there is a byproduct and waste with that. Where is that going? I have not had them answer any questions about where's the waste going. You believe that any company is going to get rid of that waste instantly, or they're going to store that stuff somewhere on site? Could that barrel get knocked over, leak through, get into the wetlands, kill our wells? I believe that can absolutely happen. I don't believe this building belongs anywhere near a neighborhood. It belongs in the industrial park. Thank you.
Can I ask you a quick question? When the planning board had its meeting, did you attend that?
I did. And I stated my same, obviously more's come to light about the pollution and the violations since then, but I was, right from the start of it, I was overly concerned. I've been concerned about Central Street,
No, but did you raise the
period.
point about that you thought that it might be a recycling facility?
At the time, I wasn't really sure what they did. Because at the time, I think I said they were good neighbors because they kept to themselves, and then all this information and the violations come, and then now I'm more conscious of looking what's going on there. Now, I'm a little further up. I'm not like Talia. I'm not directly across the street from the place. So I don't really hear maybe the noise factor, but I've seen the trucks out there. And you can come and take a look at my front lawn and see the wheel, because they can't make that turn. It's too tight. It's not engineered for 18-wheelers. It's not an industrial park. It's not engineered for them to make that turn. The islands run over, and they just put that up. That yield sign, I might as well say, go as fast as you can to Millville, because that's what they do. It's exactly what they do there. And then when they get to Millville, the exact same street is treated completely different. You can travel, you're on your bicycle in the full lane, and there's signs everywhere. There's light-up blinking signs. It's 25. The Millville police are right there. The same road that we're going to put in an industrial building on the other side of town, that makes no sense to me.
Thank you.
How you doing?
Please raise your hand, state your name and address.
Christian D. Resendez, 409 Central Street, North Smithfield. So, shortly before the last scheduled zoning meeting was canceled on September 27th, I contacted DEM about researching any public files available about MST. The person I spoke with alluded to the fact that the company had a thick folder of documents under compliance and inspection. On October 3rd, I visited DEM to see these files, which are public record. There I learned of at least 3 violations related to air pollution documented between 2013 and 2021. Along with these findings, there were a number of non-compliance letters and fines paid before these matters were eventually settled. There was also documentation of soil tests and a list of contaminants that went back to before MST was even there. But the most infuriating discovery I made was that the MST's closest abutter, that would be my family, my mother who's at 411 Central, myself at 409, were never informed of these environmental violations by MST, DEM, or the town of North Smithfield. Nor were any of our neighbors. These violations do not appear in our town records. Without MST's public proposal for expansion, I most likely would never have gone to DEM to learn about their history across the street. Now, just as an aside, this next section that I'm going to read was dealt with at the very beginning of the meeting. I'm getting educated on the process of getting you information, but just for the record, I just wanted to state this. As both the planning and zoning boards of North Smithfield can only vote on the information that is presented to them, I was advised to present my findings to the zoning board well in advance of the next meeting. 2 weeks ago, I did just that. Attached with that letter was the NRI Now News article, for which more research had been done by its reporter, Ms. Sion. Due to the number of documents I photographed, I offered in writing to provide a flash drive of all of them. I addressed the letter to Mr. Martin and CC'd Mr. Zwolinski and Mr. Beauregard. I did not write everybody. I wasn't sure what to do there. The only response I received to that letter was from John Beauregard, who I provided with a flash drive. With no other follow-up request to receive these materials in any way, shape, or form, I delivered a flash drive to Mr. Enright directly last Thursday afternoon. With what we have learned over the past 2 months and the range of concerns presented to you by several of the 1,000-foot abutters, this is more than being a matter of moving a few yards to the left or right, or the displeasure of looking at a loading dock from my front yard. We know that MST recycles and refines hazardous metals, and we know they have a history of violations with the DEM. Furthermore, they have been operating this business for the past 8 years over an aquifer, which never should have been allowed for environmental reasons. Now they want to build a warehouse surrounded on 3 sides by wetlands in a neighborhood filled with houses that have wells, houses that have families with young children. This should be an automatic no. Not only should MST not be allowed to build this warehouse in this location, in my opinion, they should be gone. Any sign, good cue. Any sign of neighborhood trust has been violated. In 3 months, we've gone from no loading dock to get off my block. Now I have no problem with MST doing business properly, but they must move to a more environmentally suitable location, as suggested by more than one person already tonight. Otherwise, your possible approval of these variances would likely lay the groundwork for the whole new list of environmental concerns in the years to come. I have a 9-year-old son that's on the autism spectrum. One thing he loves to do is to fill his cups with water. Oftentimes when I'm not looking, he gets his water from sinks in either the kitchen or the bathroom and starts drinking it. For the first time in the 47 years I've known this house, I catch myself cringing at his actions. Now, I stop him whenever I can. I take his cup away and hand him a bottled water. Because of how he is, I have to repeat these things constantly. It can take a long time before he truly understands. Now my family is preparing to get our well water and our soil tested. For me, there's a line, a very definitive line, that cannot be crossed, and it lies between industrial and residential. MST's right to expand must end where the health and safety of its surrounding residents can be compromised by their actions. I hope that you put the residents of this neighborhood of North Smithfield and the surrounding communities of Millville and Uxbridge first. This is the core concern of the decision. That is the line. So we will wait to hear what side of that line you're on respectfully. Thank you. Any questions you can give me?
Thank you. Anybody else?
Please raise your hand, state your name and address.
Bob Gillette, 49 Orchard Street. Good evening. One thing that wasn't mentioned in this proposal is there is going to be contamination. There's going to be 40 to 50 trucks coming in a week during inclement weather, stationed at these loading docks, would melt off and run off during inclement weather. Where's that runoff going to go? On that diagram showed those loading docks are, their words, 15 feet away from a river, stream, wetland. 50 times 52 weeks times years, that's my well. That's my property value. Are you prepared to put my health, my children's health, their health on this decision? They have deep pockets, but we have 500 signatures with deeper pockets. Eventually, sir, you will run out of money and not be able to fight this. We will continue to come at you. We don't want you here.
Excuse me, sir. Please.
I'll address it how I want, okay?
No, you won't.
I had
There-
rats
there's
in
a
my
forum.
house from construction, from the
Excuse me, sir.
illegitimacy
Excuse
of
me,
this
sir.
town,
Sir,
okay?
sir, you have to address us as a
Your
board.
chairman
Us
built
as
an
a board.
addition on there as a contractor without the proper permitting from this town board, from this town government, who's endorsed on his LinkedIn page by these gentlemen. Now, he may have recused himself, but he sits there with you. You're all going to be named. There's enough kids in this town that have gotten cancer because of the negligence of this government, including class members of mine, including class members of my 17-year-old daughter, my 22-year-old daughter, graduates of this school system. Wake up. If you can't be responsible, get out. Thank you.
I have a question for you. Don't you think you should address that with the town council?
I have. I've spoken with Mr. Zelinski.
Not in public?
I've spoken with Mr. Beauregard, and I have spoken in town. Your own son tried to bring it up, and he was ostracized when he was on the council. We're classmates. Okay? I've seen too many of my friends die. Kids adopted to the same family, not related, died of the same cancer. Their mother now has brain cancer, moved out of state.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Anybody want to make a motion to close the public comment section?
Yeah, I think this is a good juncture to close the public discussion. I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye. Council, would you like to respond to any of that?
Not really, but I'm gonna just bring the board back to what we're here on, if I may. So the 3 requests for relief are front, rear, and side setback. We've gone through these at length with you. I will respond to the one comment about it being so close to the road. We're actually seeking relief for it being further back from that front setback. So just to clarify that, it is pushed back from that minimum and maximum front setback. The rear speaks for itself as to why it can't be located there. Same thing with the side setbacks. And that's what's in front of you. And that's, not to simplify it, but it's dimensional relief, it's hardship due to the unique characteristics, more than a mere inconvenience. It's all those factors I have in my memorandum. And that's the charge for you tonight. And if you have any questions to clarify that setback relief, this is an MU zone. This is how it's zoned. We didn't do it. You guys didn't do it. That's where we're at. We'd ask for approval on those setback relief. I will say for the public that there's another step in front of the planning board if we are granted relief. So this board's charge is very narrow. And I know you know that, but I'm just reiterating that tonight, so.
That all?
That's it, unless there are questions.
Anybody have questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll entertain a motion to close the applicant.
I'll make that motion.
In a second.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. All right, we're into deliberations now. You've heard a lot tonight.
Mr. Chairman, I'll
Yes.
stop you for 1 minute. I want you to take just a 5-minute recess for a second. I need to talk to the board about something, okay?
Sure. You make a motion, does someone make a motion for a 5-minute recess?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye.
This is where I get yelled at.
No, it's okay. They need to hear it publicly. You can all hear it, but it's the edification, legal edification. And I'm gonna put it on the record after I explain to you the number. I want you to hear from the I think when it comes to the edification, 14 is
I'll make that motion.
Come back up. I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye.
Let me, Mr. Chairman, if I may, let me just explain for the edification of the applicant, for the people in the room, what I just advised you on. My interpretation of 12.11.14, C's been taken off the request for relief under loading dock areas shall be set back, recessed, or screened, as long as they're more than 75 feet. The applicants removed that, so that's not for consideration, but I'm gonna give you my interpretation of 14, storage and loading areas. The location of any outside storage, maintenance, and loading areas must be constructed, maintained, and used in accordance with the following conditions, : outside, this is A, outside storage of materials, supplies, or equipment. Stop. We're not talking about any of that. I think the applicant's right when it comes to storage of materials, supplies, or equipments. However, there's a comma that says including trucks or other motor vehicles shall be permitted only if, and there are 4 tenets of this, I, 2I, 3I, and 4, and under 4 it says the area is located upon the rear portions of a lot. I do not read that section to say that trucks are only prohibited and required to be in the rear portion if they are for storage materials or supplies. I don't read it that way. I read it that outside storage of materials, comma, supplies, comma, or equipment, comma, including trucks or other motor vehicles, shall be permitted only if the area is located upon the rear portion of the lots. So for the record, you can do it with it as you will in your fact-finding and deliberations. My interpretation of this part of the ordinance is different than the applicants, and I want you to understand that. Thank you.
Do we have to open back up for her to speak?
You don't have to, but she is the applicant if you care to have
Do
her.
we have to open it to do that? Or can we just,
You could ask questions of the applicant.
without opening it back up to the applicant?
Why don't you take a vote, you're more comfortable. You open it
Yep.
back up, you can ask questions of the applicant if you want.
I have a
But
motion.
I don't want to get into a debate here about it. I gave you my legal interpretation, it's up to you. That's what I'm here to do, is to advise you on the law,
Yep.
and then you do what you want with the interpretation.
I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that.
Open up the applicant again?
We'll reopen
Do I have a
the
second?
applicant.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
I'll be very brief. 3 points. One is, we're not storing trucks outside, which is what that says, outside storage, including trucks. 2 is, if there's any ambiguity in a section, it's in favor of the applicant. 3 is, I didn't seek relief from this section, so we can, I appreciate the conversation about it, but it's not included in the 3-dimensional variances in front of you today. So, thank you.
Thank you.
But, Ms. Roque, you have to admit, sometimes if there is a requirement under the zoning ordinance and the applicant fails to include it, we instruct them to amend their application.
Yeah, or there's an enforcement issue. I mean, we could go
Well,
through.
that's true.
We could go through every part of this zoning ordinance and go, are you complying with this? Are you complying with this? I applied for the 3-dimensional variances in this. Obviously, we have a difference of opinion, but we're not asking for outside storage of trucks or motor vehicles. So, I didn't apply for that, so that's where we are. Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, let me be clear. As I said to you, I'm not talking about outside storage. I'm talking about trucks. I don't read it as conjunctive, that it has to be interpreted that way. I'm talking about, I don't want to get into a debate with Joel about that, with Ms. Roca. I read it as trucks, is my interpretation of it. I don't see it as ambiguous, and I'm providing that to you so you can use it in your deliberations. You can interpret that in your weight based upon the applicant's testimony and her interpretation of it, the attorney, and my interpretation. Okay?
Right.
You should close the meeting, go back in your deliberation.
I'm just, and my only response is I didn't seek relief from that, so I don't believe it's appropriate in the consideration of the dimensional variances in front of you.
So, Mr. Archibald, not to put you on the spot, but this is probably the first time that we've run into something that she wasn't seeking relief from. So how do we handle that part of that? So we have what she's seeking relief of, and we have, the A through E and B that she has to hit, but this sits outside that. So how does that come in if we want to bring that in?
The applicant has withdrawn the request for relief under 12.11.14C for the setback of 75 feet. So that's no longer before you for that
That's right.
setback requirement. However, to say that an application for a building that has a loading dock proposed is now not subject to the entire rest of the zoning code, I think is contrary to public policy in the interpretation of these ordinances. And I don't agree with the interpretation that you're going to disregard it. I think you, quite frankly, have to weigh all of the testimony, all of the evidence. This issue was discussed, and I'm giving you my interpretation of that particular section of the ordinance. Now, whether in your deliberations you choose to follow that or make that a part of your findings is up to you as a board. It's not up to me to advise you on the policy of it. It was raised tonight by abutters. The applicant had initially had before you as a proposed measure of relief, section 12.11.14C. That has been withdrawn, but there's still a loading dock that's proposed on that building. We can agree to disagree, but my advice to you is that section does apply to loading docks.
I'm sorry.
So
So,
she would need so I'm clear, Mr. Archibald, are you suggesting she would need a variance to have the loading dock on the side of the building instead of the rear of the building?
That would be a question for Mr. Enright, your zoning official, and that's where the attorney has raised the issue that it may be an enforcement issue more than a request for a variance. I'm telling you that my read of it is that that subsection requires the loading area, the way I read it, to be in the rear of the building and not in the front lot line. That's how I read that section legally. That's how I read it. And I read it based on what I told you. There's a comma, including trucks or other vehicles. I don't read that comma as conjunctive with outside storage areas. In other words, to read it as conjunctive says that, well, as long as the trucks are for outside storage, they don't count. You could put trucks on that property and have them in front. I don't read it that way. I think subsection C has to do with the setbacks of where the loading dock is, but I think that section covers the rear lot lines. That's how I read that. So you can deliberate as a board as to whether you think the applicant needs to apply for that measure of zoning relief, or whether you think it's an enforcement issue.
So does that be, if we decide to do that way, that's a motion to do that piece, and then we do the variance for the dimensional separately? Or
I think you
it
should
doesn't,
go,
it doesn't come into the dimensional variance part, right?
I think you should go through each measure of relief that the applicant has applied for through the standard definitions of least relief necessary, all the tenets that we have, and then you should weigh the discussion about, and I'm not trying to be intentionally vague with you here. I'm just telling you what I interpret that section to be, but you as a zoning board have to make a collective determination as to whether or not you think 12.11, 14A does apply, and then whether they would need dimensional relief for it, or whether it would be an enforcement issue for the town official. You agree, Mr. Emroy? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sure. Still open, so.
Yes.
Is there anything that we can suggest to protect the aquifer, even though the people say there isn't an aquifer there?
No, I think if you're asking me, there's the discussion centered around how this aquifer was addressed and whether the aquifer now has areas in it that are
exempt.
Yeah, and this particular section, I believe, correct me if I'm mistaken, is an exempt area.
That's correct.
So it was very proper for the public to come and testify passionately about how they feel about the aquifer, but I don't think you can make your decision based upon, it's clear that there's an exemption for the aquifer. I think if you based your decision upon it being in the aquifer, the applicant would appeal it to Superior Court and overturn you in 2 seconds. I wouldn't base my decision on that. I'd weigh out the passion of what people spoke about in the room, but I certainly would base it upon the fact that your decision that this area is now exempt from the aquifer. That's the law. That's the way it is. Like it or hate it. That's what happened in town, and that's the law.
Yep, I agree.
Steve, I have a question.
Sure.
So are you drawing a parallel that the fact that there's a loading dock there implies that there would be, at any time during the day, that would constitute storage of a vehicle?
No, I'm not, that's a good question. I'm not addressing storage at all. I think the applicant's right about storage, and they're not saying they're gonna store anything there. Where I disagree with the applicant is on trucks. And, you know, the applicant's raised the issue of if it's ambiguous, it falls in favor of the applicant. That's true. If this were appealed and the Superior Court were to look at this and say, it's vague, we're not sure, vagueness falls on the side of the applicant. They would certainly prevail on that point. And, you know, I make mistakes every day of my life, but in my opinion on this legal analysis, I don't see it as conjunctive. I see it as disjunctive, including trucks. That's how I read that. Mr. Enright confers with me. We've talked about this for 20 minutes while you were in deliberation, and I've looked at this before I came in, and I was, you know, and then it was raised tonight, so I feel I have to address it for your edification. If I didn't say that, I'd be remiss in my duties as an attorney advising you on what I feel the legal interpretation of that part of the ordinance is.
Thank you.
All right, so for a dimensional variance, there's certain tenets that one must hit. I'm gonna read the tenets and then give my opinion of what I feel is for that tenant. So 931, Section A, that the hardship from the applicant seeks relief is due to unique characteristics of the subject land or structure and general characteristics of the surrounding area, and is not due to the physical or economic disability of the applicant. The applicant in their testimony and supplied paperwork state the existing lot is encumbered by a large freshwater swamp, a stream, and a special aquatic site. They are trying to set the building back as far as possible. That's what was stated by the applicant. This is generally true. There is lots of wetlands on that land. But this is the way the land is, which makes the placement and the size of the building to be tough to fit on this property. The placement of the loading dock closest to the street will affect the general characteristics of the surrounding area because it will be visible from the street. The current building, which is about 100 feet off the road, is very visible, and I don't see anything related to the physical or economic disability of the applicant. Anybody got anything to add on that? That's how I feel about that. Section B, that the hardship is not a result of any prior action of the applicant and does not result primarily from desire of the applicant to realize greater financial gain. The applicant in their testimony and supply paperwork have stated no to this. And I agree, there is no financial gain here or prior action. They have their other building there, they're looking to expand the operation that they already have performing. Section C,
But wouldn't that's financial gain?
we always struggle with financial gain.
We do struggle.
Anything anybody does is financially gain, right? You build a house, it's a financial gain, right? You have vacant land, so,
Right, if the property was bigger, they'd build a bigger building and they'd have more financial gain.
right. So no matter, we always
Don't
struggle
see
with
that.
that, and, that's kind of the action we take on that.
Yeah, Mr.
If
Chairman,
somebody was,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
if somebody was gonna build, like, say, someone bought a piece of property and they were looking for a bunch of relief, and they were a builder, and they weren't gonna live there, that's to me, that's a financial gain. They're building something so they can sell it for financial gain. We kind of lean the other way when an applicant comes in front of us looking for that variance, on a residential property where, they're gonna live there, right?
Right.
So, that's the way I feel. I feel this is the way they're gonna live, right? They're not building this so that they can sell it to make more money. And will they sell it eventually? Probably, but right now, they're trying to expand the current operation that they have. Yes, Mr.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if you were, I agree, 100%. We've had this discussion many times in other meetings. I think if you were to interpret financial gain as if it's an absolute mutually exclusive provision, that without financial gain, if there is, strike that, if there were any financial gain, then you have to disapprove the application, nobody would ever get approval. You have to just weigh that. I'm not trying to be flip about it, but you have to, just as you interpret it, you weigh that in the balance of tests. Take the Mesolella application at the last meeting. Clearly, they're a developer, there's financial gain, but that was only one of the that was even written in the decision. I put that in there. Yes, there's financial gain, but that was only one of the factors that you weighed out in the balance of tests when you ultimately did approve it, right?
Right.
So you're interpreting it the right way. Don't get hung up on the fact that there's financial
There's money
gain,
involved.
meaning that you have to shoot it down.
Right.
You'd never approve anything.
Section C, that the granting of the requested variance will not alter the general characteristics of the surrounding area or impair the intent or the purpose of the zoning ordinance or the comprehensive plan upon which the ordinance is based. The applicant in their testimony and supplied paperwork have stated that the proposed use is in a conforming with what is allowed in a mixed-use industrial MU district, which I think we all agree. If they didn't have to come in front of us for variances, they could build whatever they wanted over there in an MU2 district. So, I believe it's true, but there are setbacks for a reason, and a lot of the relief is being sought for these setbacks. The intent of the ordinance is to keep the loading dock at a minimum of 75 feet off the road, which, we've talked now that that's more than 75, so that really doesn't apply. But I still think that the neighbors are gonna be able to potentially see this loading dock the way that building is configured. So I think it does alter the general characteristics of the surrounding area. You must stay back from the road so the neighbors across the street can't see this. There will be altering of the general characteristics of the area because you're gonna have more trucks. We're talking 20%, more trucks coming into that area, just in bringing loads, and then now you have transfer between buildings of material, which, they are smaller trucks, but it's still gonna increase the traffic. So, some of that stuff's gonna come into that building, which I think is 30%. And also possible more trucks moving between the two buildings, which I stated. The trucks are gonna be, between the buildings, will be pulling out on the main road to get from building to building. If they don't get that variance, and I believe in their testimony, they stated that they weren't gonna use that road. But I think Mr. Casale stated tonight that, if they did get that variance, they would use that road to move between the two buildings. Section D, that the relief to be granted is the least relief necessary. My opinion, this is not the least relief. I consider it to be the maximum relief. You're consuming a large part of a buildable part of property to put this size of building in it. You are asking for a massive amount of relief from the back setback massive relief from the side setback, massive relief from the front setback, and additional relief for the loading dock.
Well, that's true, but
I'll strike the loading
this
dock.
is an inverse ordinance. This is an inverse ordinance. Usually, when you ask for a variance on a distance, it's because someone wants to build something 2 feet within their property line.
I know.
And the setback is 40 feet. Here, it's the opposite. There's a maximum amount that is actually closer to the street, and they're asking for more distance away from the street. So, I think you have to look at that when you try to decide what's minimum and what's maximum.
So moving of the parking lot and the building farther back, then this would be least relief. By moving the building back and possibly changing the size or reconfiguring the building for a loading dock to be in the back would eliminate relief for the loading dock so close to the street. That would be the least relief to be granted to me. I just see it as this is the maximum relief that you could ask for on that piece of property. You know, considering you have so much wetlands, there's not a lot of buildable spot on there, and they're trying to put a big building in a very small spot. You know, Mr. Biragad, you know, stated it probably more elegant than I did, but we kind of have the same opinions on some of this now that I'm reading. Number E, that granting of the variance requested will not confer on the application any special privilege that is denied by this ordinance or the land, structures, or buildings in the same district. I believe it'll give them special privilege because they're getting the maximum use and relief by building this massive building on this small lot. And at the time, they were asking for 4 measures of relief, which is 3, because we're gonna strike the loading dock. But they're gonna have to get relief for the loading dock being in the back.
And there is another special privilege, whether or not we're allowed to look at it or not, but it's reality, and I can't ignore it. And that is, this is a recycling facility. And if you look at page 518 of the use table, one of the requirements of the section 12 is that this use must be consistent with the use table. And you go to 518 under industrial uses, a recycling facility is prohibited. You can't even ask for a special use permit. So that, I know it's not under our purview to decide it, that it already has been decided, but anyone here with a computer can Google right now, precious metal reclamation facility, and I guarantee you within the first 5 words of that click, they're gonna find the word recycle. They're gonna find it. It's a recycling facility. So whether the planning board didn't pick that up, whether they considered it, whether they didn't, I'm sitting here under the auspices of granting a variance and deciding whether or not there's a special privilege being granted. If anyone else put this in this district and didn't have an existing building, this would be called a recycling facility, and it wouldn't be allowed. It fits under, kind of, sort of, given the limitations that are in the planning board decision, which I fully acknowledge, Ms. Roca, which says that this building is only going to be used for storage and separation. But begs the question, isn't separation and sorting a fundamental activity of recycling? So, that's the biggest special privilege to me.
Let me jump in for a minute. I think you have to focus on what the relief is that's being
That's right.
asked for in front of you. And I said to you earlier, respectfully, Mr. DeZizel, let me finish. I said to you earlier when we first opened the meeting that you don't want to get off on a tangent and start getting into the uncharted waters of the planning board. They've been before the planning board. They received a certain measure of relief. Like it or hate it, that's what they're here on. So we got to stay focused. We don't want to get into areas where we don't have any ability to make a decision one way or the other. It's okay for the people in the room to testify about how they felt about that, and you can weigh it all out. You're not going to stop somebody in the public who's in a butters testimony because they're talking about aquifers or the planning board, you allow that to happen because they're abutters, they live here, they pay taxes. All that's fine. But you as a board need to be very careful about getting into how you interpret that. You need to take it just as it's presented before you now. You can't go back in time or interpret it as how you think the ordinance should be. Do you follow me?
Yep.
You guys all follow me?
No, you're asking me to make believe that what I believe is not the case, and I have to respect the decision of the planning board. That's what you're asking me to do.
No, I'm not asking you to do that at all. I'm asking you to take things on the face value, what they call prima facie, just as you have before you tonight on its face as a board, and not to go back in time to the planning board. I mean, you can discuss that those are part of your frustrations, but you certainly shouldn't make it a tenet of your deliberation and put it on the record, because if you do so, and you base your decision on that, and the applicant takes an appeal up to Superior Court, you're gonna get overturned like that. You need, I'm certain that I don't wanna argue with you, I'm here to give you legal advice. I stay away from policy. Focus on what's in front of you on the application, the relief granted. That's what you need to do, seriously. That's where you should focus.
I appreciate your counsel, Mr. Solicitor, but I practiced law for 27 years. I've been in conference rooms where lawyers were all getting paid $2,000, $3,000 an hour, and little Chris DeZiel was getting paid $350 an hour, and when the dust settled, Chris DeZiel was right.
Chris, I don't wanna get, Mr. DeZiel, I don't wanna get in debates about ego. I told you earlier, I make
It's not a
mistakes.
matter of
Let me stop
ego.
you. I make mistakes every day of my life. Just focus as a board. I'm right about this. Focus on the application that's in front of you. Focus on the relief that you see, and you won't set yourself up for getting overturned because you're in uncharted waters that you shouldn't be. And let's leave this alone. I don't wanna talk about it again or debate it. Mr. Chairman, please, let's move on.
Okay.
You got anything else, Chris?
No.
Sure.
Is it okay?
Speak into the phone now. People can hear you. We're deliberating. We're deliberating.
Is it okay if we were to approve it, I'd like to have them soundproof the building to at least meet the town standards, so they won't hear it from the road?
I mean, we have
And then I
a
would-
noise ordinance already, so, I mean, that's a moot point, right? If they're just making too much noise,
Yeah, but if
someone
they-
can complain, go to the building
If they know
inspector.
ahead of time, they won't have to wait and get all the complaint. They would put their building, they would put more insulation in to start off with. Then the other thing is, I'm referring to, they follow all good environmental standards for water and air.
Which they're regulated by DEM to do that, right? I mean, if you had a residential property there, there's less DEM looking into this. Like, they gotta do RIPSIs, they gotta do a bunch of reports for DEM. Like, that water on that property is gonna be cleaner than if a residential property was on that, going off. There's gonna be no runoff. They have to have cisterns that
Yeah,
contain that.
that part I'm comfortable about, is
Yeah,
that
if
they
DEM
have to have
they gotta
the
pass DEM.
drainage system and all that approved.
Follow all good environmental standards for water and air.
They can't hear you, Vinny.
Vinny, just pull the microphone closer. No one can hear you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, you have to, we're deliberating, we have to.
What I really wanna know, what I was asking the chairman, I was saying if we approve it, could we add to the thing that the building should be soundproof to town standards, start off that way? And, two, to follow all good environmental standards for water and air. That's what I was asking, what they said.
That it? Section 932A does not apply, but Section B does, which is in grant of a dimensional variance, that the hardship that will be suffered by the owner of the subject property if the dimensional variance is not granted shall amount to a more than a mere inconvenience. The fact that the use may be more profitable of the structure may be valuable after relief is granted shall not be grounds for relief. My opinion is, more than a mere inconvenience puts the burden on the applicant to prove there is no other reasonable alternative to enjoy a legally permitted beneficial use. They did state that they wanted a bigger building than what they actually proposed, but I believe that building is still too big for what they're trying to put on that property. There is other use of that property by building a small building that fits better on the property, which would make the the variance is less and push the building back more off the property and allow for the natural trees already there to not be touched, then a line of, you know, leaf-bearing, non-leaf-bearing trees between the building and the untouched natural buffer, and basically shield that building from the neighbors, you know, because regardless of the time of year that it is, we want that building to be shielded as much as we can. And you, by right, can build on that property, but the excessive release requested is too great, in my opinion. So does anybody have anything to add to any one of those tenets?
I think you hit it right on the head.
You can make a motion. Who's making the motion?
I'll take a shot at it.
Okay. In the motion, what I would say is in that motion, we've already talked to the applicant of hours of operation, that trucks can come in and out of that facility between 8 and 5. And we talked to them tonight about not allowing trucks to be idling while parked in the storage area.
Or on the street.
Yeah, down the street.
Can we say on the street?
That's a good question. Mr. Archambault, I don't know if you heard that, but we want to put in our motion to not allow trucks to be idling in the storage. And can we say street too, or not? Or is that too,
Because street
is that
a
outstepping our
public
bounds?
thoroughfare, is that, can we limit that?
Because there's a loading dock that's being proposed in the area, and I've given you an interpretation of how to look at 12.11.14, and I see it as a totality, A, B, and C. If you decide to apply that standard and say that the zoning, it's not a measure of zoning enforcement, because certainly if you were to prove it, it's gonna be built, you can weigh that decision out. I do want to point something out, though. When you're going through your tenants, make sure that you stay on the variance relief and not slide over into use relief.
So too much use in mind?
I got up for a second and had a discussion with the applicant about that. I want to make sure you're not going off on a tangent about use. You know, you have to make sure you stay with just the tenants. You're doing a fine job of analyzing it, but stay with just the tenants under the dimensional relief. I know it's an emotionally charged issue, but you've got to stay with the tenets of the relief that the applicant's seeking before you.
Okay. So, Chris, you want to make a?
Yes, let me, I'm just making some notes.
Yep.
Do you want me to?
Hours of operation?
No, but just make it a generic motion, or actually list the specific?
I'd list the specifics. And then, did we talk enough about the 14, Mr. Archambault? Or do we have to deliberate more about the 14? Because, you know, I agree with the solicitor that it's not read the way that the applicant reads. I read it as you read it, which is, you know, outside storage of material, comma, supplies, comma, or equipment, comma, including trucks or other motors. If they wanted that to be all-inclusive as being storage and material, there'd be ands in there. You wouldn't see commas in there. So I don't know what else needs to be said on that. Do we need to?
Again, let me just recap it for you. Here's where I disagree with the applicant. I think because the relief includes a loading dock and you have preliminary approval from the planning board before you, the applicant did initially have relief requested under C. They've withdrawn the request for the relief under C tonight, right? So the applicant's argument is that they are no longer applying under that subsection, and if you rule on that part of the subsection, they're gonna go up on appeal and say it didn't apply, right?
Right.
They have a loading dock. I interpret that entire section to run together, okay? I interpret it to say, storage and loading docks, location of any outside storage, maintenance, or loading areas must be constructed, maintained, and used in accordance with the following conditions. The following conditions. And then when it says outside storage of materials, supplies, or equipment, comma, including trucks. Trucks are gonna be used in the loading dock. There's been the applicants testified to that. There are facts in testimony that talk about trucks being used on the loading dock, where the loading dock's gonna be located. I think you can talk about rear as opposed to front setbacks in how you weigh out your relief. If, and this is the big if you decide that that's an issue that's presently before you, if you decide collectively that the applicant hasn't applied for that variance and therefore you can't rule on it, you just have to rule on the other two pieces with the two subsections in one of them, then you then you have to decide that way. And I'm not trying to be, I'm trying to give you as much information as I can objectively so you can make the decision. I'm not gonna, as an attorney, it'd be improper
give us
for me to
opinion.
make the decision
Yeah.
for you as to how much weight you wanna give what's been presented. The applicants testified about that, there are facts and evidence, abutters have talked about it. You certainly have enough factual evidence before you to give weight that you think may or may not apply to the Section 4 loading dock there. And I think that's up to you to interpret whether you wanna do
So
that
will
in
we
your
make a
decision.
motion that the board believes that they need to get a variance from 14.4? Or that we don't, because we always do our decisions in the affirmative, right? So we wouldn't pull this in on our decision for the affirmative, right?
I
And
think,
that's how we do it as a board, but.
I think what you just said a minute ago is, quite frankly, I wanted you to draw that conclusion on your own. I think that's a very sound interpretation. If you feel that the applicant should apply for dimensional relief because you interpret the strike that, you interpret the storage area and the loading, strike that, you interpret the loading area to be required to be in the rear lot line, you certainly could make that as part of your decision, that if the applicant were to keep that loading area as it is in the plan, they would need to apply for relief for a dimensional variance under that. You certainly could do that, that's sound. That would survive an appeal.
So, did you get that, Chris? And if people don't want that motion, then we get rejected and another
Well,
motion is made.
my only practical issue with that is if, because we've had things where we've asked for additional things in the past and asked people to reconfigure things.
Mhm.
Wouldn't the other option be to ask the
Yeah,
applicant?
we're getting to that. We're getting to that.
Okay.
You certainly could do that.
Right.
Mr. Ziesel was
Right.
absolutely right.
We're
You have
getting
the
to that.
discretion to continue it and ask the applicant to apply and come back
If
rather
they're-
than issue a
if they're
denial.
interested in that.
You have that discretion.
Okay. Do we have to make a motion to do that? Or we just ask the question?
You're still in deliberations trying to hone out a motion. I think you should talk it out amongst yourselves and publicly and come to a conclusion one way or the other.
How does everybody feel about that? Do you guys feel that that's the way that 14.4 is, or do you feel that it's not?
I certainly think that it bodes that they're not seeking the least relief necessary. They're seeking the maximum. I think that goes to what you were saying, that point about seeking the maximum relief. If by putting the loading dock in the rear of the building reduces the size of the building, that would go towards the least relief necessary in keeping with keeping vehicles in the front of the building.
Yeah, but how do you feel about the section 14.4? Is it something that we want to ask of the applicant, that
I'd give
they
them the
give the
option,
option?
for sure. Why not?
Hey,
I don't see,
Scott,
I
let me
don't,
ask you a question, because I don't want
I
to
would give
reopen
them the
asking the applicant any other questions. So is that, to me, it's pink, so I don't want
Yep,
to be colorblind.
it's pink.
Okay, thank you. Is that pink footprint and that thing that's jutting out, is that just the silhouette of the loading dock, or is that the physical building?
So that the whole pink is the building, and that top right is the actual loading dock.
Okay.
So that jut out at the top right is the loading dock. And I'm correct in saying that, right? That top right is the loading dock going up? That jog in, I think, is the office and the parking lot for the office, and the loading dock is the top part. What do you got?
Yeah, you're correct. So if that wasn't there, they might have enough egress, not really. Because that green that comes out also is a restriction, right?
That's right. They gotta stay out of that.
So they both.
Which is why, the bill,
So
for
what
that
they
size
would-
building, they really can't turn it much.
What they would have to do is both get rid of that cutout and slim the back of I don't know if that's the width or the length, depending on how you look at it. So you could physically get a loading dock back there and not encroach on the wetland.
Right. They'd have to change the size of the building to be able to get it.
Which, in turn, probably adds a complication to their drainage system.
But again, that's outside of our purview.
I know, but I'm just trying to see how onerous it is to ask them to do that. I'm trying to be fair.
I mean, how do you feel on 14.4? Do you feel that Do you interpret it the same way?
No,
that
I
some of us have
interpreted, before Steve came to talk to us, I interpreted it that way, that if a truck is parked overnight, that in effect fits under the purview of that first section.
I don't even know if I would put the overnight part into it.
Yeah, I don't think,
It has
I
nothing to do
don't
with
think
the
the time
overnight.
of day matters.
Right, it's just, it's a,
Well, all right, that's probably true. I'm making an assumption that during operating hours, the trucks are gonna be moving in and out.
right. I mean, they may be overnight, but they may not be overnight. It's just more of where the loading dock is. Do you have any opinion on it, or?
If our town solicitor is interpreting this, that the loading dock needs to be at the back of the building, I can only follow the advice given by the town solicitor. That's my opinion.
What do you feel on that?
Yeah, I think that's a correct interpretation.
Vinnie, how do you feel on that? 14-4? Do you believe it? Do you agree with the interpretation?
I have to follow the lawyer's interpretation.
Right.
But are we gonna do it piecemeal and approve the first two parts and say they have to come back and ask for a variance?
Well, there's a couple ways we can do it. One, we can ask them
Right.
if they want to continue and address that, and they can say yes or no. And if they say no, then we go with our motion to approve, right, in the affirmative, and then vote. If that's it, if that's what you guys want to do. I want to do that. I want to ask the
Hey,
question.
to make the motion, to make the continuance, to ask him to come up with an alternate configuration that would put the thing in the back's a lot easier than trying to come up with a motion to get all this relief in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Counselor, can you approach the bench? So, you know, we're kind of all on the same page that 14-4 applies to you. So we can go one of two ways with this. We can ask you if you want to do a continuance of this meeting to come back to address that, or do you not want to do that?
I don't know, I mean, we would have to put testimony on that you can't put the loading dock in the back, which we can do. I don't think it applies. So I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not prepared to answer that question right now. You can continue it and we can let you know, but that leaves the other three requests for relief.
Oh, we could put it in the decision.
What do you put, but it's a decision
Now you
on
have to come
something I
back and get
haven't.
asked for a variance.
That's not, yeah, that's not in the decision.
Well, we can put it in our decision, based upon our advice of our counselor.
On something I haven't asked for, that's, go for it.
Okay, what does everyone want to do?
I'm gonna make a motion that we continue this to a date certain and ask the applicant to come back with an alternate configuration that would make it feasible for the loading dock to be in the rear of the building.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Do we do a roll call vote on that?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Pasquarello?
Yes.
Mr. Mark Antonio? Mr. DeZiel?
Yes.
Mr. Marston?
Yes.
Good.
What do we got for dates? No, but we can't use the first Tuesday, that's election day, right?
That's right,
That's right.
Meeting we have for the rest of this year
is December.
is December 13th, and then we're into January.
Are you not voting, are we not voting on anything else?
Nope.
Okay.
Try to pick a date certain that works, see if the applicant has a date they prefer. Try to get back here as soon as you can.
So our next date that we have available is December 13th. Does that work for you guys, as applicants?
We have 2 applicants for that date already.
We do?
I think they're gonna be,
We push till January?
We can't make a special meeting date?
You certainly can, because there's notice, and everyone's here, so you can pick a date. It's a good rhetorical question. You should pick a date that works for everybody so you can get finality to it.
I know next week, and I'm away the week of the 14th. So I only have the week of the 7th, and the week of the 21st, and the week of the 28th in November. And
Ms. Roca, I can tell that you're not happy, but would you prefer a longer date or
Doesn't
a
matter.
shorter date?
Doesn't matter.
November 22nd, which is Thanksgiving week.
Sure.
Or do we move to the following week, the 29th?
So the 22nd would be a normal meeting for us. We just normally don't do a
Do
meeting on
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving week.
Mhm.
So, and the reason I'm pointing that out is because we would know that this council chambers would be available and no other board or, committee would be meeting here because it's normally reserved for zoning.
Does anybody have a problem with the week of Thanksgiving?
No.
The Tuesday? Council, the 22nd of November?
That's fine.
All right, so I want to make a motion to that.
I make a motion that we continue this application to November 22nd.
Date certain.
Yes, to date certain of November 22nd.
Now I have a second. We have to roll call, can you do it all in favor?
You can even roll call and everything, I'd roll call it.
Roll call, please. Yes.
Mr. Pasquarello?
Yes.
Mr. Mark Antonio?
Yes.
Mr. DeZiel?
Yes.
Mr. Marston?
Yes.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.